Hello, I'm Kaitlyn Althaus, and this presentation will be on my chosen film for the course project, which is Mulan. Why I chose Mulan. I chose this movie in part because ever since I was little, I've loved the movie and the characters that are in it. I also chose it because I feel that the movie is very empowering once you look into it. It basically tells little girls and women that you're able to do whatever you want, no matter what your gender is or what anybody tells you. All you have to do is persevere and try. The objectives of this presentation will be to describe culture, listening, verbal messages, interpersonal relationship types, conflict management, and perception, and how they connect together with communication as a whole. The first aspect of communication I will discuss is culture. The two cultures seen throughout this movie are the Chinese and the Huns. Mulan's culture is Chinese, whereas Shan Yu, the main antagonist, is part of the Hun culture. One aspect of culture that is apparent is stereotypes. These fixed opinions about someone based on perceived characteristics or expectations about a group and not on factual information about the individual are most apparent in the treatment towards Mulan when she is a woman. In the beginning of the movie, when the Chinese are recruiting soldiers, Mulan is basically told to stay out of it because she's a woman. And later on, when her gender is discovered, Chief Fu drags her out of the tent, saying, "I knew there was something wrong with you," and calls her a treacherous snake. This shows that Chinese perception was that a woman was subservient to men, and that if she went against this, she was treacherous in the eyes of the man. Also, by calling her a snake at the same time, he's putting her even further below him because snakes typically are seen as evil, or at the very least worthless and disgusting. Another aspect of cultural stereotyping seen is how the Hun army is depicted both in the animation as well as how the characters react to the Huns. In regards to the animation portion of it, the animators chose scary-looking brutes to depict the Huns, and the characters all run in fear from them, not only because of their appearance, but because of their reputations. The Chinese have placed the scary stereotype on them because of stories they've heard about them. In the case of Shan Yu and his army, however, it seems the stereotyping is true. Shan Yu is a ruthless military man who will do anything to achieve his goal of dominating China. This holds true to the actual Huns, who were a ruthless band of nomads hailing from Central Asia. Who the actual Huns in the movie are meant to represent is more ambiguous. During the height of the Hun Empire, under Attila, the extent of the territory didn't reach China, and they didn't try to invade China as the movie would have you believe. Instead, it is more likely that Shan Yu and his army are meant to represent the Xiongnu. Many scholars believe that the Huns originated from the Xiongnu, but that's still open for debate. The Xiongnu were a ruthless group of nomads as well, so either way the stereotype rings true both in the fictional universe of Mulan as well as our own. And as you can see in these two pictures, we have Shan Yu, the main antagonist, and then we have two Chinese imperial soldiers who are seen cowering in fear at Shan Yu and his little hawk. And then here we have Shan Yu and his pack of surviving goons after the initial skirmish with the Chinese. And as you can tell, the animators drew them particularly large, except for this one, and mean looking, which is what they were going for. Didn't want people to want the, the Huns to become leaders of China. Listening is the next portion. The next aspect of communication I'll mention is listening. Throughout most of the movie, there's pretty good listening amongst the characters, but in the beginning of the movie, Mulan and her father both display poor listening. Because Mulan is upset about her father being forced to go to war despite his bad leg, she was clouded by her own anger. Interruption was the level of listening most seen at this point. While it wasn't verbal interruption, Mulan was so upset that she interrupted her father by not seeing his point of view. Both failed to see the other's point, be it Mulan upset about the conscription, and her father being clouded by honor and his duty to the emperor. This all could have been resolved in a better way than Mulan running off to join the army by employing empathic listening. Empathic listening requires a willingness to be non-judgmental and to listen openly to the speaker's thoughts and feelings. Neither of them did this. Next is verbal messages. The verbal communication I chose was between the matchmaker and Mulan. In this scene, Mulan is ready to be interviewed by the matchmaker. As the matchmaker calls out her name, it's apparent she already has a poor view of Mulan for speaking without permission. It's also apparent that the matchmaker has a poor attitude in general, which will be further evident later on in the scene. While it's easy for the viewer to see this as rude, it tells a lot when supporting characters confirm the rude manner, such as when Mulan's grandmother asks who spit in her bean curd. Although it is her job to find the girl a man, she's very judgmental, but saying that Mulan is too skinny and that her body is not good for bearing sons. This is obviously a cultural thing, but it adds to the rude verbal communication going on. This scene is quite a one-sided conversation as well, since although Mulan is using formal language that is more careful and more mannered than everyday language, the matchmaker doesn't believe she has the right to speak since she is speaking out of turn. Even though Mulan was more than polite by saying "Pardon me," also the matchmaker adds to her angry, rude persona by demanding that Mulan pours the tea. Instead of saying please, she demands it of Mulan, and despite mistakes made by Mulan, the matchmaker failed to see her own backing behind the incident. Had she been more respectful, a lot of what occurred would not have happened. Also, by calling Mulan a disgrace who will never bring her family honor, she's completely missing how things could have turned out differently had she not been so mean and rude. The next subject I will discuss is interpersonal relationship types. Now there are three types: friendship, family, and romance, but really there are only two shown in the movie. There's slight romance towards the end with Mulan and Shang, but it's not really enough I feel, to put into this. The first is friendship. Friendships also play a big role in the film. We see Mulan develop quite a few friendships throughout the film, most notably with Mushu and Shang. In the beginning, Mulan and the other soldiers in the army didn't get along due to Mulan's inexperience with how men act with each other and her taking advice on how to act from Mushu, who is equally lacking in knowledge of the subject. Without the friendships acquired, Mulan never would have been able to defeat Shan Yu, save the Emperor, and thus save China. Next is family. Family is the biggest driving force of the whole movie. Had it not been for her father's conscription, Mulan would have never left to join the army and eventually save China. These types of relationships are the strongest and longest lasting. Mulan clearly has a good family life, as seen by her conversations with her parents as well as her grandmother. Conflict management. A big conflict scene is after Mulan is discovered as a woman and is trying to warn Shang and the army of the advancing Huns. Shang tells her, "You don't belong here, go home." And when told by Mulan that he needs to believe her that the Huns are coming, he says, "Why should I?" indicating his lack of trust in her after he was lied to, albeit for a good reason. Mulan then asks a very important question. "You said you trust Ping. What makes Mulan any different?" This all ties back into the cultural perception that women are weak and can't do anything, let alone do anything better than a man. Shang tries to avoid this conflict by having his horse walk on. This leads to ineffective communication through avoiding the conflict. Mulan used the time between her confrontation with Shang and her actual rescue attempt to take 5 and evaluate how the situation could be resolved. She decided that if Shang wouldn't listen to her and help her, she'd show her resolve to him, and that's what she did, and the conflict was resolved at this point. Mulan defined the conflict, examined the possible solutions, tested the solution, and evaluated the solution. And in this case, the solution worked. Had it not worked, though, she would have to continue the cycle of defining, examining, testing, and evaluating in order to determine what the best resolution to the conflict would be. Perception is the last thing I'll talk about. Mulan perceived her world pretty well throughout the movie. When she first went off to join the army, she obviously had no idea what she was getting herself into. But through the building of her self-esteem, through sheer determination and practice, she began to see the dangers she had put herself in. And because she became more confident in herself and her self-image was raised, she was able to take charge and rescue the Emperor from the Huns, as well as rescue Shang from his death on the mountain. Had she attempted that as soon as she left her home, she probably would have never succeeded and would either be killed when discovered as a woman, or she'd be forced to go back home. A good self-image raises your self-esteem. These two things are connected and very important to one's success in things. Because she was able to persevere the oh, sorry, because she was able to perceive the world around her, her self-esteem and self-image increased as well. And here's my evaluation. The process throughout the whole movie was the personal growth of the heroine Mulan. While yes, the movie was about her saving China, it was also about her growing as a person. Before she joined the army, she was a sheltered girl living in a male-centric village. She was paraded around in front of the town matchmaker in hopes of finding a husband for her. She was subservient to the will of her father and the men around her, and was seen as a weak girl who needed protecting. Now, comparatively speaking, Mulan had a pretty liberal upbringing by ancient Chinese standards, but still. She yearned for more, and when her handicapped father was conscripted into the army, she saw her chance to achieve something while still maintaining her family honor. Familial honor was what the Chinese saw as most important. One had to please not only their living family, but also their ancestors. As Mulan completes her training in the army as Ping, she begins to grow as a person. Her self-confidence is boosted, and she feels like she can accomplish something. By the end of the film, we see a strong, independent woman who not only saved her commander, but also her emperor and the whole of China. If that's not character growth, I don't know what is. People just look at this movie as another kid Disney movie, but to me it's more than that. The story itself is about the empowerment of women, and that we can do whatever we set our minds to, even save a nation. Now this isn't part of this movie, but there was a sequel to the film. In it, Mulan is seen educating the girls of her village, as well as helping the Emperor's daughters find their own path and happiness in life. Basically, I just see these films as a good example of how women can do whatever they put their minds to. And here are my resources. I watched the film through Netflix. I used the textbook, Understanding Interpersonal Communications, and I used chapters 2 through 10. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to put them all listed, chapter 1 reference, chapter 2 reference, so I just did that, but I can change that if you want me to. And I also used the course material as a reference, and then for a little information on the Huns, I used a outside website to just look. So yeah, thank you for listening and being my teacher, and I hope you have a lovely day.